The night the spotlight died, something inside him whispered that the world was about to change, whether he wanted it or not. December 3rd, 1987, Tokyo Dome backstage corridor. The hallway should have been glowing with victory. The final echoes of the Bad Tour's opening show still trembled in the concrete, like an audience refusing to leave even after the curtain had fallen. But behind the stage doors, the air was wrong, too still, too cold, as if someone had turned down the world's volume without warning. I was there when it happened. When Michael, 29 years old, exhausted and impossibly alone, despite the thousands screaming his name, stepped out of the spotlight and into a darkness only a few of us ever saw. The fluorescent lights above flickered in a stuttering rhythm, throwing fractured shadows across the floor. Each flash distorted the hallway, stretching shapes into silhouettes that moved when no one moved, breathing when no one dared breathe. It felt like the beginning of a thriller, the kind where the danger wasn't outside, but already coiled inside the main character, waiting to strike. I found myself walking slowly, almost unconsciously quiet, as if any sound I made might trigger something fragile, something already at the breaking point. He entered the room ahead of me without saying a word. No triumphant smile, no flush of adrenaline from the show, only silence, a heavy one, the kind that settles on your skin like dust in an abandoned building. This wasn't the Michael the world knew. This was the Michael stripped of lights, stripped of applause, stripped of every shimmering layer the industry had forced onto him. His shoulders were low, not from the weight of his jacket, but from something far heavier, expectation, perfection, and the terrifying success of Thriller, a success so enormous it had become a cage. I hesitated at the doorframe. Something told me this moment wasn't meant to be witnessed. Then Katherine entered. Her footsteps were soft, but her presence cut through the tension like a single beam of sunlight through storm clouds. She moved toward him with a steadiness I envied, touching his shoulder gently, almost ceremonially. He didn't flinch. He didn't turn. He simply stared at the floor as if it were a cliff he was standing on the edge of. I couldn't breathe. "Michael," she murmured, her voice low, warm, unshaken. "You don't have to carry everything tonight." The air tightened. He exhaled, but it wasn't relief. It was restraint slipping, soundlessly, dangerously. He whispered something I couldn't hear. She heard it, and whatever it was, her expression faltered. Just enough for me to know it mattered. She glanced at me then, a look so brief and yet so commanding that it rooted me to the spot. She leaned closer to him, her voice barely a thread of sound. "He's trying to carry the world alone. Not accusation, not pity, just truth, a truth that settled deep in my bones." The room felt wrong again, like a puzzle missing a single crucial piece. Something was building, pressure, emotion, fear, like heat beneath the floorboards of a house that still looked whole from the outside. Then she turned fully toward me. Her eyes were calm, but in that calmness was a warning, a prophecy, something ancient and unyielding. She took one step closer, and the hallway behind her darkened as if the light surrendered to her gravity. "If he keeps going like this," she said softly, "something legendary will be born, or something inside him will break." There it was, the sentence that split the room open. A chill ran along my spine, settling at the base of my neck. I felt as though I had been pulled into a secret investigation, a psychological labyrinth, where every clue was hidden behind someone's heartbeat, someone's silence. And the person at the center of it all, the man the world believed untouchable, was unraveling right in front of me. Michael lifted his head then, not fully, just enough for me to see his eyes, dark, haunted, searching for something that wasn't there. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. His exhaustion was a shadow clinging to him, tightening its grip each time he blinked. Every breath he drew felt like it cost him something, something important, something he could not afford to lose. The world outside was celebrating him. Inside this small, dim-lit room, he was fighting himself. I realized then that this wasn't just post-tour fatigue. This was the beginning of a descent, or an ascent, the kind that rewrites a person, the kind that changes history, Not gently, but violently, dramatically, with consequences no one can predict. Katherine leaned down, placing her forehead briefly against his temple. A quiet gesture, but one laden with fear disguised as strength. "I'm here," she whispered. But even as she said it, I could tell she sensed the shift, an invisible crack forming, stretching across the surface of her son's spirit. A crack that, if pushed just a little farther, might open into something dark and uncontrollable, or into brilliance the world had never seen. She straightened, looked at me once more, and her voice dropped to a whisper that felt like a verdict. "You need to stay close. Tonight isn't an ending. It's the beginning of something neither of us can fully see yet." And with that, she left the room, quietly, deliberately, leaving me alone with a man who had just stepped out of the spotlight and into the shadows of his own mind. The door clicked shut behind her. The silence returned, and I knew deep in my chest that whatever came next would not just be a turning point. It would be the moment the legend began, or the moment he was nearly lost forever. The night after Tokyo Dome felt wrong from the moment I stepped outside. The city was alive, too alive, neon signs pulsing like frantic heartbeats, crowds swarming the streets in restless tides. Yet beneath all that noise, something hollow tugged at the edges of my awareness. A silence, a void. Michael was missing. He wasn't on the schedule. He wasn't in rehearsal. He wasn't in the hotel suite where security insisted he must be resting. But I knew better. I had seen his eyes last night, eyes that belonged to someone who was slipping out of himself. The corridors of the hotel basement were dim and empty, lit only by a single emergency bulb that flickered as if startled by its own existence. Every step I took echoed, and the echo felt like it belonged to someone else. The deeper I went, the more the air thickened, like the building itself understood the weight of what was happening. Then I found the first sign, a glove, not the iconic one, a simple rehearsal glove, white cotton, soft, slightly wrinkled from use, left on a bench in a hallway where he never had reason to be. Michael didn't misplace things, not by accident. This was intentional, a breadcrumb. I felt a cold twist at the base of my spine. Suddenly, this wasn't just a disappearance, it was an unraveling. I followed the corridors until they bled into the underground parking garage, a concrete maze where shadows hid inside other shadows. It smelled faintly of gasoline and rain. Somewhere far off, a pipe dripped in a rhythm too steady, too deliberate, like a countdown. I spotted another breadcrumb, his tour jacket neatly folded on the hood of a van. My pulse spiked. He had left behind the armor the world expected him to wear. That meant one thing: he didn't want to be found by fans. But maybe, just maybe, he wanted to be found by someone who understood the weight he was carrying. I stepped toward the jacket and froze when I heard it. A voice, faint, strained, not words, just breath moving through emotion too heavy to shape into sound. I followed it to a stairwell door, pushed it open, and a cold draft swallowed me whole. The stairwell spiraled downward, the lights weak and inconsistent, leaving patches of darkness that swallowed the steps entirely. I moved fast, each footfall a warning ricocheting down the concrete shaft. At the bottom, the door stood cracked open. Beyond it was a storage room, metal shelves lined with forgotten equipment, walls sweating from the winter chill. And in the center of that forgotten space, barely illuminated by a failing lamp, sat Michael, alone. He wasn't collapsed. He wasn't frantic. That would have been easier to understand. Instead, he sat unnervingly still, hands clasped, elbows on his knees, head bowed. The posture of a man holding himself together by threads, frayed almost to breaking. I didn't dare speak at first. I wasn't sure if interrupting would save him or shatter him. When I finally stepped closer, he inhaled sharply, not startled, but as if the presence of another human reminded him he still existed. His voice came out low, almost inaudible. "I feel like I'm vanishing." The words hung in the cold air like a confession. Not dramatic, not poetic, just painfully honest. His fingers tightened. His shoulders trembled once, barely enough to see, unless you were close enough to feel the tremor ripple through the room. He continued, "Out there, they see everything they want. Not me. I'm losing pieces I didn't know I could lose." He lifted his head slightly, and when our eyes met, I felt something primal tug inside me. Fear, empathy, helplessness. The kind you feel watching someone stand on the edge of a rooftop, not because they want to fall, but because they no longer know how to step back. "I can't breathe in that light anymore," he said. "Not tonight." The lamplight flickered, briefly plunging us into shadow, before returning with a weak pulse. The shadows clung to his face, carving deep valleys beneath his eyes. The world outside called him a superstar, an icon, untouchable. But in that room, he was simply a man too tired to carry his own legend. I took a breath, steadying myself. "Michael, you're not disappearing. You're overwhelmed. That's all." He shook his head slowly. "No, it's deeper than that. I can feel something pulling at me, like I'm standing between two versions of myself, and I don't know which one survives." His words chilled me. This wasn't exhaustion. This wasn't stress. This was a man at the crossroads of identity, fighting a silent battle the world would never see, a battle he didn't fully understand himself. I stepped closer until I could hear the ragged edges of his breathing. "You're not alone tonight," I said quietly. For a moment, for a fraction of time, so small it barely existed, he allowed the silence to soften. His shoulders eased, not much, but enough to show he heard me, enough to show he wanted the words to be true, but the reprieve didn't last. Footsteps echoed distantly from the hallway above, security searching. Michael's eyes flicked toward the ceiling with a flash of fear, not fear of being found, but fear of being forced back into the role he wasn't ready to return to. He stood abruptly. I reached for him, but he stepped back into the dim corner of the room, half hidden by shadow. "I need time," he whispered. "Just a little more time before the world grabs me again." Then the footsteps drew closer, voices, names, questions, and in that rising noise he looked at me with a quiet intensity. "Don't tell them yet." The request was simple. The consequences were not. I nodded once. He slipped deeper into the shadows, into himself, just as the door above burst open. And in that moment, with the chaos of the search closing in, I realized something terrifying. Tonight wasn't the collapse, it was the descent, and whatever awaited him at the bottom wouldn't be darkness, it would be transformation, violent, brilliant, and inevitable. By sunrise, the city had no idea what had happened beneath it the night before. Tokyo buzzed with its usual mechanical certainty, trains rushing, neon flickering, people weaving through streets like synchronized currents. But inside the Imperial Hotel, everything felt out of rhythm. Security whispered, assistants paced, managers snapped at one another in hushed tones. Something about Michael's unexpected absence, something about reputational risk, something about damage control, but none of them knew where he'd been. None of them knew the storage room. None of them knew the tremor in his voice when he said he was vanishing. Only I knew, and I had given my word. The morning passed in a blur of tension, like watching a storm gather behind glass. Every corridor felt narrower. Every quiet moment felt dangerous. Then, around 10 a.m., a soft knock at my door broke through the haze. I opened it and froze. Katherine stood there, elegant, calm, eyes that saw through skin, through bone, through excuses. Her presence alone felt like judgment and mercy woven together. "Walk with me," she said. No question, no explanation, just an instruction. I followed her down the hall, past staff members who stepped aside respectfully, past the elevators, and into a private lounge the hotel had prepared for her. The room was dim, lit only by a single lamp placed deliberately near a sofa. The shadows in the corners felt intentional, like they were part of her design. She closed the door behind us, and then, for a full 10 seconds, she said nothing. Her silence wasn't empty, it was investigative. It pressed against me, unraveling the truth she already suspected. Finally, she asked, You know where he was last night, don't you? My throat tightened. I... He... He asked me not to... I'm not asking for betrayal, she interrupted. I'm asking for understanding. Her voice was soft, but it carried the weight of someone who had lived through decades of genius colliding with pressure, fame, fear, expectation. She wasn't a mother in that moment. She was a sentinel standing guard at the edge of her son's unraveling. She moved slowly to the sofa and sat, her hands folded neatly in her lap. Last night, she said, I felt something break. The words chilled me, not melodramatic, not exaggerated, just unbearably true. She gestured for me to sit opposite her. He doesn't break the way other people do, she continued. Most people fracture outward, anger, panic, outbursts. But Michael, when he breaks, it happens inside, quiet, invisible, like a glass that shatters but somehow keeps its shape. Her voice trembled just slightly. When he was a child, she said, I learned to watch for the silence more than the noise. There it was, the twist, the missing piece, the perspective only she could give. She looked up at me sharply. Tell me what you saw. Her request was not optional, so I told her the truth, not the details Michael wanted hidden, but the essence, the fear in his voice, the stillness that felt like surrender, the sense that he was balancing between two versions of himself. When I finished, Katherine closed her eyes for a long moment. Then she whispered almost to herself, It's happening again. A chill spread through my chest. What is? She opened her eyes, and for the first time, I saw something I had never seen in her before. Fear. Every time Michael reaches a height the world celebrates, she said slowly, a shadow grows behind him. Not a rumor, not a scandal. A shadow inside him. Her fingers tightened. And each time he has to choose, let the shadow consume him or turn it into something the world has never seen. I swallowed hard. Last night, she said, he was close. Closer than he's been in years. She leaned in. And when he gets that close, something extraordinary is born, or something inside him breaks. My pulse quickened. The same words she had said yesterday, now heavier, now sharper, now pointed directly at the truth neither of us wanted to admit. She stood, paced slowly to the window, and looked out over the city. Then she spoke again, voice low. He made a decision last night. The air around me seemed to constrict. What decision? She didn't turn. That's what terrifies me, she said. I don't know yet. The room felt suddenly colder, she continued. But when he makes these private decisions, these internal shifts, they change the way he breathes, the way he moves, the way he sees the world. Her voice cracked, barely perceptible, and the world feels it before he ever says a word. Then she turned abruptly, eyes shining with something fierce. I need you to stay close to him, she said, closer than anyone else. Watch him, not as a star, not as a performer. Watch him as a man who is trying not to lose himself. The responsibility pressed onto my shoulders like a physical weight. Because if he falls, she added softly, he won't fall loudly, he will fall silently, and by the time the world notices, it will be too late. Her words lodged in my chest like a warning bell. I nodded, but inside doubt gnawed at me. Watching him wasn't the hard part. The hard part was the helplessness of knowing that sometimes the person you're trying to save is walking a path only he can navigate. Katherine approached, placing a gentle hand on my arm. You felt it last night, didn't you? She asked. That something changed. I hesitated. Then I admitted, yes. Her expression didn't change, but I sensed a shift in her. Good, she whispered, because the next part of his journey will not be gentle. A knock thundered at the door before she could say more. Security, frantic, searching again. Katherine exhaled slowly. It begins, she murmured, and in that instant I realized something devastatingly clear. Last night was not the bottom. Last night was only the opening act of a transformation the world would one day call legendary, but only if he survived the process of becoming it. The rehearsal hall at the Dome was never truly silent. Even when empty, the room hummed with the memory of footsteps, shouts, music. Its walls seemed stained with echoes of past triumphs. But that morning, the silence was different, dense, anticipatory, like the room itself held its breath, waiting for something inevitable and dangerous. I arrived early, following Catherine's instruction, stay close. But staying close felt less like a task and more like entering a crime scene after the suspect had already rewritten the evidence. The hall was dim, lit only by the overhead fluorescents struggling to warm up, their flickering cast jittering shadows across the polished floors, transforming the empty space into something surreal, half stage, half interrogation room. Then the door at the far end opened, and he stepped in, Michael. But not the Michael from 2 nights ago, not the trembling version in the storage room, not the exhausted performer drowning beneath applause. This Michael moved differently, measured, precise, as if each step were part of choreography no one else had been taught. His posture was straight but not rigid, controlled, too controlled, like someone who had made a decision so absolute it drained the fear out of him and replaced it with something sharper. He didn't acknowledge me, not yet. He simply walked to the center of the room as if pulled by an invisible anchor. The air around him shifted, subtle but undeniable. He exhaled once, slow, deliberate. And I realized with a thud of dread and awe, whatever had happened inside him last night, he wasn't fighting it anymore. He was embracing it. He removed his jacket carefully, folding it with the same precision one uses to fold a confession before handing it over. He placed it on a bench along the wall, then stepped onto the taped mark in the center of the floor. For a moment, he stood completely still, not breathing, not blinking, just waiting. Then, without warning, he snapped into motion. A sliver of movement, a sharp pivot, a glide so clean it looked like he'd severed his connection with gravity. My pulse spiked. This wasn't practice. This wasn't warm-up. This was an unveiling. He moved as though the shadows themselves obeyed him. Each gesture cut through the air with surgical precision. Each turn seemed fueled not by rhythm, but by a force deeper and more volatile. Pressure transformed into artistry, fear melted into intention. But what struck me most wasn't the skill. It was the emotion simmering beneath it. Intensity, defiance, rebirth. A man rebuilding himself, piece by deliberate piece. He stopped suddenly, mid-motion, mid-breath, then rolled his shoulders back as if shedding the last remnants of the person he'd been 2 nights ago. His breathing was steady, controlled, not a trace of the tremor I'd heard in the storage room. Then his gaze slid toward me, not sharp, not cold, but unmistakably changed, like he'd stepped through a door I couldn't follow him through. "You're early," he said. His voice was calm, almost too calm. "You are too," I replied. He gave a half smile, a tight, unreadable curl of the lips that didn't reach his eyes. I couldn't sleep. There was no apology in his tone, no exhaustion either, just truth, spoken like a verdict. He walked toward the mirror wall, studying his reflection as though it were someone else entirely. The silence stretched thin, vibrating with a tension I couldn't name. Then he said something that made my stomach twist. "I think I've found what was missing." I didn't ask what, didn't dare. Instead, I watched him raise one hand and place it against the mirror. His fingers trembled, not with weakness, but with something frighteningly close to anticipation. And then he began, a sequence of movements, sharp, fluid, haunting. Nothing like the routines the crew had prepared, nothing choreographed. This came from somewhere deeper, a place between impulse and instinct. At one point, he slid back across the floor in a motion so impossibly smooth my breath caught. He wasn't dancing. He was becoming something, a shadow, a presence, a myth still forming. He repeated the motion, refining it, bending the physics of the room around his will. And each time he did it, his expression shifted, focus sharpening, resolve deepening. I didn't know what it would become, but I knew, every cell in my body knew, that the world would one day freeze in awe the first time they witnessed it. And it had begun here, in this empty hall, born from the aftermath of a breakdown no one else had seen. He stopped finally, breathing harder now, palms pressed to his thighs. When he looked up, our eyes locked in the mirror. "I'm not disappearing," he said softly. "I'm refining." A shiver slid down my spine. Before I could reply, the doors burst open, assistants, crew members, managers pouring in, filling the hall with noise and urgency and questions. But Michael didn't flinch. He didn't even turn toward them. He had crossed into a different plane, internal, silent, resolute, the kind of transformation only witnessed in legends long after the fact. Katherine arrived moments later. She didn't call his name, she didn't interrupt, she merely watched. And when her eyes met mine, I saw it, the recognition, the quiet dread, the awe. He wasn't the same man she'd whispered about in fear 2 nights ago. He had chosen the other path, the dangerous one, the inevitable one, the one where breakdown wasn't an end, but a catalyst. And as he began moving again, stronger, cleaner, transformed, I understood something that made the room feel suddenly smaller. We were witnessing the creation of something legendary. But transformations like this don't come without a cost, and that cost hadn't revealed itself yet. The arena was a hollow giant, empty seats stretching into darkness, stage lights flickering like interrogation lamps. A ghost of last night's rehearsal still lingered in the air, vibrating through the beams and scaffolding. But underneath all that metal and anticipation was something more unsettling, a tension, a pulse, a truth rising to the surface whether we were ready or not. Tonight wasn't a show. Tonight was the test. If Michael cracked here, everything that had happened in the last 72 hours, the vanishing, the silence, the transformation, would collapse under the weight of expectation. But if he rose, the world would witness something unforgettable. I stood backstage, watching him adjust the cuff of his jacket. He wasn't jittery. He wasn't overwhelmed. He had the stillness of someone who had already fought the war and was simply waiting for the smoke to clear. Katherine watched from the wings. Her hands were clasped tightly, but her face was unreadable. Not fear, not hope, something older, something that had been forged through years of watching greatness tear at the seams of the boy she raised. "Are you ready?" I whispered. Michael didn't look at me. He didn't need to. "I've been ready," he murmured. "I just didn't know it until now." The house lights dimmed. A single spotlight snapped open on the center of the stage. He stepped into it, and something electric shifted in the air. This wasn't just a rehearsal. This was an unveiling, an exorcism, an emergence. The band struck the first chord, the stage floor vibrated, the speakers trembled, and then he moved, not like before, not like the man who had glided across that rehearsal hall as if the earth itself bent for him. This was sharper, more dangerous, more deliberate. His body obeyed a rhythm that felt ancient and new at the same time, precision meeting instinct, instinct meeting reinvention. Every motion was a revelation, as if he were pulling each gesture directly from the fault lines within himself. Then came the moment, the one I knew was coming, the one he'd been chiseling into perfection since the early hours in that empty hall. He shifted his weight, leaned back, and then the room held its breath. He slid, effortless, impossible. A movement that defied the logic of gravity and friction and the human body, a movement that felt like a secret whispered to physics itself. The handful of crew watching from the seats gasped, not loud, not theatrical, real, a sound people make when the world reveals something new. He repeated it, cleaner, sharper, more precise, and this time even the silence felt stunned. I didn't clap, I didn't breathe, because I understood. This move, the one the world would one day call iconic, was not born from inspiration, not from ambition, not from showmanship. It was born from the night he had disappeared, from the storage room, from the whisper of, "I'm fading," from the fracture that had threatened to swallow him whole. This wasn't choreography, this was survival turned into art. He pushed through the final sequence, sweat streaking down his temple, eyes burning with something fierce and frighteningly alive. The music hit its last note, echoing across the empty seats like a gunshot. Silence crashed down. He stayed frozen in place, chest rising and falling, gaze locked on some point beyond the audience, beyond the stage, somewhere deep in the labyrinth of himself. No one moved. Then Katherine stepped forward. Her footsteps were soft, but in the cavernous stillness of the arena, they echoed like a heartbeat returning after too long without a pulse. When she reached the edge of the stage, she didn't smile. She didn't cry. She simply said, with a voice trembling at the edges, "You transformed." And in that moment, the weight of her words pressed against all of us. She wasn't congratulating him. She was acknowledging the truth. The Michael standing under that spotlight was not the same man who had collapsed inward just days before. Something had broken, yes, but something else had grown in the fracture, something luminous, something legendary. He stepped down from the stage slowly, almost ceremonially, as if shedding one identity for another. As he approached us, the lights above flickered again. Once, twice, and for a fleeting second his shadow split across the floor, mirrored and multiplied, like the ghosts of the versions he'd almost become. When he finally stood in front of me, he asked quietly, "Do I look like I'm disappearing now?" I shook my head. "No," I whispered. "You look like someone the world isn't ready for." He exhaled, a small satisfied sound, and for the first time since this ordeal began, he let his shoulders relax. But Katherine wasn't done. She touched his face gently, searching his eyes for the pieces she feared had been lost. "What did you decide that night?" she asked. The question, the one she'd been carrying, the one I had been afraid to hear the answer to. He looked at her, expression unreadable. "I decided," he said softly, "that if something inside me was going to break, then I would choose the shape it broke into." A tremor ran through me. This was the twist, the revelation, the truth behind the transformation. He hadn't survived the breakdown. He had harnessed it. And the world would witness the result without ever knowing the cost, because legends aren't created in front of crowds. They're forged in the shadows where no applause can reach. And as he walked away from us, heading toward the exit with a calm that felt almost dangerous, I understood one thing with terrifying clarity. The world would remember what he did next. It would redefine him, admire him, mythologize him. But only we would know the truth. His legend wasn't born on stage. It was born in the dark when he faced the edge of himself and stepped forward instead of falling.